Perfect. Chief, I want to start off with how many years have you worked with LRPD?
Almost 27.
So was this a goal to eventually become chief, or did it just kind of fall in your lap?
No, actually, when I hired on June the 10th of 1996 in the academy, one of the kind of exercises you go through as the chief come in at the time, which was Chief Caudill, and kind of go around the room, ask you, where you're from, why you chose this profession, and what your long-term goals were. And as I got to me, I did my spiel, but my last long-term goal was I'd like to be chief one day. And I can remember my classmates laughing and everybody getting a kick out of it. But here I am, almost 27 years later, and kind of fulfilling, living a dream, really.
Now you're the one who's laughing, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess.
For people who want to get to know you better, like outside of the profession, what would you tell them?
I'm a homegrown guy. I'm from Little Rock, born and raised here, a graduate of Little Rock School District, attended J. Fair High School, graduated in class of 91. Little Rock's home. When I'm not doing this line of work in my profession, I'm a family guy. I'm married. I've got 4 awesome kids, and 3 in college and 1 currently going to school here in Little Rock. And then I do a lot of volunteer work with various organizations. I volunteer with the Martin Luther King Commission, and something that's very passionate for me is Special Olympics Arkansas. I do a lot of volunteering with them. That's something that's near and dear to my heart, because I can't think of nothing greater than doing what I do on the professional side, but on my personal volunteer side, being an advocate and somebody who advocates for inclusion of those with intellectual disabilities is something that means a lot to me.
Something that I heard a lot when you were announced the new chief is that you are the bridge. You are going to be that man that can work with the FOP, the BPOA, make sure, that things are going smoothly. First, what is your thoughts when you hear that?
Honored when I hear that. It lets me know that I've kind of remained true throughout my career. I've built my career on relationships, not only just internally but externally as well. I think it's important to have that communication and the opportunity to network with people in the community, people here in the police department, and give them a voice, being able to listen to them. I think that's very important. That oftentimes we get caught up in our day-to-day lives, we get caught up in work and all the issues that are going on, that sometimes we lose track of listening to people's ideas and their opinions and their thoughts. Even though if you don't disagree or agree all the time on issues, it still gives the opportunity there to have a discussion, which I think is important. It's healthy for relationships as well. So I think that's where I've been able to try to be a bridge, is to just be a good listener, which I think is an important communication skill, not just being able to talk, but just being able to listen.
I think that also is a lot when you think about it, and thinking of just the past couple of chiefs we've had to have that honor. How do you keep yourself accountable when they say these things that you are going to be different? What does that look like?
It's you try to remain focused every day. I wake up with some goals in mind to try to be fair, reasonable with my actions, listening to everybody. And then, always leaning on folks. I have mentors, not only here locally in the state of Arkansas, but I have some around the country that I lean on to get their input. I try not to buy into all the things that social media and other platforms have. I just try to focus on day to day. I live my philosophy in life with, try to do one good deed a day and learn something new every day. And I think as long as I can do that, I think I have the opportunity to be effective in my job performance.
Is there anything with your leadership that you want to really focus on for this department?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to meet with command staff already and talk to a few people internally, but one thing I'm going to really focus on is kind of the acronym that I've developed. It's called CPR. CPR is kind of a resuscitation mode, for so to speak, but for us, it's reassessing and resuscitating our department would be the CPR acronym, C being communications, how to improve our communications internally and externally with all of our partners. The P standing for pride and professionalism. Taking pride in what we're doing, being professional at all times, because I think as officers, if we're doing that, then we'll have that layer of transparency, and we'll have the community being supportive of us. We'll have the community being able to talk to us because we are a professional organization. And that R is relationships. Working on our relationships internally, trying to reestablish and get everybody on track what our goals are, what our mission is for the department, and then building on the foundation of our relationships within the community, because the community is our foundation. We cannot do what we do without the community support, without hearing our community. So those are, to me, the 3 fundamental things that are important to me that will help us be successful as we move forward.
I think that's interesting because with the mayor's administration, he talks a lot about transparency, and there's been some critiques on that, including with the Little Rock Police Department. So
Yes.
is that something you're looking into as well?
Yeah, I'm big on transparency. I think it's something we have to continue to improve on. We always have to step back and evaluate how we're doing things, and I think that should be done on a year-to-year basis. Look, grade ourselves. We expect the community to hold us accountable, and we should hold ourselves accountable, even from myself all the way down to the lowest patrol officer in the organization, and even some our civilian personnel as well. So we have to be accountable and be transparent, because that's the expectation now from our community, is to be transparent. And it's if you look back in 2015 when President Obama introduced the 21st century policing concept and pillars, that transparency was one of the pillars, and that's something we adhere to. We're a best practices organization, and we're going to elevate and continue to have that transparency.
I don't know if this is something you're thinking of down the road, but is there something you hope to accomplish in, the first 100 days, or, in this beginning of your transition as chief, something that you can look back on and say, yes, we accomplished that, or no, we didn't?
Yeah, there's already some things in place. Obviously, our real-time crime center is a project that we're moving very quickly on. We'll be up and probably 100% running with that here in the next couple of months. Very excited about that. Another thing was obviously taking some of the recommendations from a staffing study and putting that into motion. That's one of our issues there that we're tackling right now, looking at the ways to implement that, reorganizing the department to where we're more efficient and effective in the way we serve the community. And then obviously violent crime, tackling the issue of violent crime. We're using a couple of models now. Dallas PD has a really good model that has been successful in working with them, where they've seen a decrease up to 20% in violent crime over the last year. We implemented a component of that the last month of last year. We saw a decrease in some of our areas, so we feel pretty good about that. We're going to continue to expound on that, those efforts, and then continue to establish our relationship with our federal partners, state and local partners as well, about how we can work with one another to help drive some of the issues with violent crime, meeting with the prosecutor's office and just trying to get everybody on the same accord. And I think another piece is getting the community more involved. We can't do it alone. We have staffing issues. We're no different than any other agency across the country. So in order to fill some of those gaps, we leverage our technology, we leverage some of the other things, but the community is also a big component of that as well, getting them involved in neighborhood meetings. Crime Watch programs, having discussions, our youth programs. So there's a lot of different things to try to address that. We're gonna steam full force with those. What's
the component and the model that y'all are looking at that is showing success?
The idea of identifying from the Dallas model, looking at those areas that are, so to speak, our hot spots where we're having a lot of our issues with violent crime, the time to days that those are occurring, and then we're increasing our patrol efforts in those, taking a proactive approach, high visibility, and trying to see if we can influence and drive those numbers down. And we've been successful over the last month seeing that, and we'll continue to evaluate that. And then as we realign and reorganize the department, that'll shift some units around to where we can hopefully maximize our efforts to become more efficient in the way we're handling things.
Because you can see the violent crime trend downwards.
Yes.
But that record high homicide number was just really hard. So is that something you're looking at? Like, how do you address that when, police department can only do so much,
Yes.
but you guys are trying new things?
Homicides is a very difficult challenge for us, because unfortunately nobody calls and lets us know those things are about to occur. So it's a lot of it, it's reactive on our part. But there are some things I think we can do on the front end from a preventive standpoint, increasing patrols, visibility, trying to perform different outreaches. I think our real-time crime center will help with that. And where we're not, our detectives are doing a phenomenal job of, out of the 81 homicides we had last year, 52 of those were solved with arrests, 29 still unsolved. But, that leads us to about a 65% clearance rate, clearance rates on those cases, which is huge. The national average floats around 50%. So our detectives are working very diligently to solve and bring closure on the front end to families, and hopefully produce cases that are going to lead to successful prosecution. So we'll continue with that. We'll continue to analyze how we're going to do it. And then another component is getting people in the door. We're expanding our recruiting efforts, trying to get more officers in and letting know people that this is still a great, noble profession. Yes, we've had challenges that the profession has. The tragic death of George Floyd really created a strain on law enforcement. It created strains between law enforcement and community relations. Produced some reform efforts that were probably needed in the profession. So we've got to rebuild off that and let individuals know, hey, if you really want to make a difference, you're concerned about your community, this is a great way to do it, a great way to become involved. And the ability to give back and serve, I can think of no greater thing in the world than to serve your community.
Let's talk about the community was really concerned about that violent crime. So what would you tell them to reassure them that, you guys are working on it? Like, should they be afraid to go out at night?
No, I think, the world we live in now is a lot different world than we knew 10, 15, 20 years ago. We live in a different society now, and very challenging for all of us. I'm very concerned when we hear about, shots being fired in the neighborhood and drive-bys or incidents that occur at schools or parks. I mean, that is very concerning to me, and it's very, these senseless acts are very troubling. But people should still go out and enjoy what Little Rock has to offer, any community has to offer. I mean, Little Rock is, we're a city with challenges. We're no different than Memphis or Dallas or any other big cities around us. But, people should remain vigilant. If you see something, say something. So often we've heard of, don't say anything, just, don't snitch or anything like that. But, we need the community's input. That they're another piece to the puzzle to help solve. We can't do it alone. Our officers are working tirelessly to try to get out there and solve crimes and be visible. It's just, we've got challenges, and it's no different.
The last few questions I have, you talked about recruiting efforts. Staffing has been a criticism of some of the FOP. How are you addressing making sure that there are enough officers on the street and making sure that you are fully staffed?
We are, of course, we're sitting right about 86 vacancies right now. We've just raised our salary. We're blessed enough that the city board and the mayor were able to come to agreement with the bargaining unit to get us a good contract to help raise our level. We're the highest paid municipality in the state of Arkansas, which is good. That helps, recruiting when we're trying to drag people in to be part of our awesome organization here. So we'll continue to push our recruiting efforts, and I think we'll see that continue to grow. Another thing I think it's important for the community to understand, we have a lot of officers now that were hired under the Clinton years on the COPS grant that they're reaching a retirement potential, and we're seeing those retirements kick in, and so that's trying to convince people to stay is challenging at times because, this is a hard job to do. We've reached 28 years, but it's still great, and a lot of them stay on. But so you battle with retention. So we've got to make it enticing for officers to want to stay and continue to do that. So we'll continue to reach out to our colleges and those that have a desire to do this job, and look at non-traditional ways as well. Some people that just are maybe used to do construction in the years, and we're going to try to bring them in. And I almost think we have to take an approach to where like college athletics does. College coaches, once they get on an athlete, they stay on them. I think that we have to do that as well. And then we'll look at certified officers as well from, looking to try to bring lateral officers into the program. And so I think that's a good way for us to kind of beef up our numbers. And I think that will come.
There was an outside study done that was brought to the board, and it talked about the Little Rock Police Department has enough staffing quota, but there are too many police officers that sit behind a desk instead of outside patrolling. Is that something you're addressing? Do you agree with that?
Yes, and that's part of our CPSM staffing study that was done. We are looking at, we realize from a command standpoint that there are jobs probably in the department that doesn't necessarily have to have a sworn officer on it. So we're reevaluating those, looking to hire on civilian personnel. We're already doing that in our detective division. We hired some civilian investigators. We're doing it in our background investigators for hiring. We've got some civilian personnel that we're working now in our TRU with our cadet program. So we are looking at positions to add for civilians so we can put uniform back on patrol.
How's that going? What's the reaction from officers?
Well, I think first they're skeptical, but I think the better we do of trying to explain why that is, I think they get comfortable with it. One thing is law enforcement, we hate change, but that's the one thing that's constant, inevitable. Change is always going to occur. So we have to deal with that and communicate that effectively and why we're doing what we're doing. The study itself was a good study. I think it gives us a good roadmap to where we plan to start. And that's I met with my staff, and we actually met this past Saturday to discuss that, and we are moving full forward with some implementation of a lot of the recommendations that were proposed by the staffing study.
Chief, you've answered my questions. Is there anything else you would like to add that I haven't touched on?
No, I'm excited about the opportunity here. I'm very humbled that I was chosen by Mayor Scott to lead this organization. We have a lot of great men and women that work here that really put a lot of effort into doing a great job for the community. We're here for the community. One thing that will be very much an important part of me being the chief while I'm here will be to, bridge that gap with the community. We want to be out there in the community. I've been involved in a lot of things since I took the helm on December 21st, and will continue to be involved in community, attending meetings, and look forward to hearing the feedback. I mean, because like I said, we can't do it without the community.